Welcome to your first assignment. This video will expand on some of the points made in the guidebook on the standard response below. You will need to have your sound turned up. The topic of trait versus type is important because type represents a rather special way of thinking about people, which is not the usual way we have come to expect in measurement approaches. Almost everything you see in TV that relates to any sort of research will be a trait approach. Failure rates in schools to mortgage rates to divorce rates are all trait measurements. These are almost always characterized by something less of one end of the scale and something more on the other end of the scale. Let's take a look at a group of students. This circle represents the whole group. Now let's take a common trait measurement, like their exam scores, and put some letter grades to them. This is a typical example of a trait scale. You have the good marks on the one end and then less and less of the good marks as you go to the left. The left side is deficient. It is deficient by definition. It has less of a positive trait measurement, in this case exam scores. On the right, the A plus might represent 90%. Then you take some away and you get an A, which might be 85%. Then you take some more away and you get an A minus, and so forth down to the lowest grade. Now let's take this original group of students and distribute them along this scale. It shows the common bell curve or normal distribution. That is, most people fall into the middle. In this case, they get middle grades, around a B minus. But if you get A pluses and if you get Fs, so far so good. But trait scales are almost always creating the haves and the have-nots by cutoff points. In this case, the cutoff for scholarships might be set at a minimum of an A minus, and anything less gets nothing. Go low enough and the person may not even pass. You can think of many cutoff points: SAT scores for college entrance, income levels for car loans, typing speed for clerical jobs, driving license test scores, and the list goes on. So what happens is that the trait approaches basically create winners and losers. The end result is that people are afraid of being judged and found wanting. That's one of the big fears people have when using personality type assessments. They are afraid of the results. This is not an unfounded fear. There are personality tests based on trait scales in which you most certainly can be found wanting. In comparison, personality type assessments sort people into two different but equally valued groups. Introversion is not seen as a deficit of something good called extroversion. We aren't measuring, we're sorting into two groups that express their energy flow in different but equally positive ways. Everyone learns something positive about themselves, so there are no winners or losers, just winners. Your role as a practitioner is to reinforce the positive aspects of any personality type and help them make the best use of their natural preferences. Here's the payoff to understanding the difference between sorting and measuring. It means that all personality type results are positive and have value. Many clients will be surprisingly anxious, making jokes about even having a personality. This illustrates that they are afraid they will be measured, as opposed to sorted, and found wanting, in other words, being made into a loser. You can assure your clients that their type results will be helpful and encouraging. Low preference scores indicate the client is uncertain of his or her result. Let's take an example. There are 15 bipolar questions that sort for extroversion-introversion. If the client chose the extroversion option 14 times, they would be indicating a clear preference for extroversion. The preference clarity score is created by subtracting the two scores. So in this case, the score would be a preference for extroversion with a clarity score of 13 out of 15. The significance of this strong score is that the test-retest correlation of people with this score is 0.99. In other words, if they took the assessment next week, next month, or 5 years down the road, they would almost certainly score as an extrovert. If another person chose extroversion only 8 times, the preference would still be extroversion, but now the preference clarity score would only be 1 out of 15. You will note that if the person changed just one of their extroversion choices, they would score now as a low preference introversion. Now the test-retest correlation is only 0.46. Which means that if the person retook the assessment next week, they might change their type from extroversion to introversion. Sometimes clients will ask, how come I'm changing back and forth? The answer is that they're not changing their type. They are consistently expressing what was obvious with the low scores. They're unsure of their preference and they're hovering between the two. However, a low score still has a positive correlation and is the best indicator of that person's type. So don't assume that your client should distrust their result. Even with low scores, the great majority of clients will see their results as fitting. Sometimes you will hear, "Oh, I have a low score for my feeling preference. That must mean I'm more of a thinker." As you can see from the numbers above, a low score for feeling is still choosing that preference more often than thinking. Otherwise, it would be a thinking preference. Remember to review the debriefing notes on page 122 of the manual. They contain some good suggestions. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please contact your mentor.